The wind moved across the high desert like an old memory, slow and restless, carrying dust, regret, and the echo of lives that had passed through without leaving a mark, and that was how Ethan Cole lived his days, quietly, invisibly, as if the world had already decided it did not need him anymore. He was known around the scattered ranches as the Lonely Cowboy, not because anyone had officially given him that name, but because loneliness clung to him the way the sun clung to the cracked earth. At 42, Ethan had buried more dreams than he could count, a wife who left because silence felt heavier than love, a child he never had, a family table that never echoed with laughter. His ranch sat alone at the edge of Apache land, a place most folks avoided, but Ethan stayed because solitude was safer than hope. Every morning he saddled his horse before dawn, every evening he returned to an empty house, and every night he sat on the porch watching the stars, wondering when life had quietly passed him by. It was on one such evening, when the sky burned orange and purple, that he saw her for the first time, standing near the old fence line as if she had stepped out of the land itself. She was Apache, her presence calm yet powerful, dark hair braided with purpose, eyes steady like someone who had survived storms without losing herself. Ethan should have asked what she wanted, should have spoken like a man used to company, but instead he froze, because something in her gaze felt like a challenge to everything he had accepted as permanent. She introduced herself simply as Ayanna, her voice low but firm, and explained she was helping her community restore a water path that crossed his land. Ethan nodded, gave permission, and expected that to be the end of it, but it wasn't. Over the next days, she returned, always working, always grounded, and slowly the silence between them softened. One evening, as they shared coffee on the porch without planning to, Ayanna spoke words that landed like thunder in Ethan's chest. "I want to have at least 5 children." She said it without hesitation, without embarrassment, as if it were the most natural truth in the world. Ethan laughed softly at first, not mockingly, but in disbelief, because he had spent years convincing himself that family was something meant for other people. Yet she didn't laugh back. She looked at him and said children were not a burden but a blessing, not noise but legacy, not chaos but continuity. She spoke of her people, of generations, of love that multiplies instead of dividing, and as she spoke, something ancient and forgotten stirred inside him. No one had ever spoken of the future with him as if he could belong in it. Night after night, their conversations grew deeper, about loss, about purpose, about fear, and Ethan realized that his loneliness wasn't destiny, it was a story he had been telling himself because it hurt less than believing things could change. Ayanna challenged him without trying to, simply by being herself, by carrying hope like a responsibility rather than a risk. When she left each night, the house felt emptier than before, not because it lacked her presence, but because it had tasted meaning again. Ethan began waking earlier, working harder, noticing the land with new eyes, imagining a life filled with voices instead of echoes. Still, fear whispered to him that men like him didn't get second chances, that dreams spoken out loud were dangerous. Yet Ayanna's words stayed with him, repeating like a drumbeat in his chest, 5 children, a future, a life built on love instead of avoidance. And as the desert night wrapped around his ranch, Ethan understood that meeting her was not an accident, it was an invitation. An invitation to choose courage over comfort, hope over habit, and connection over the safety of being alone. And as this chapter of his life quietly closed, one question lingered in the air, heavier than the stars above: was he brave enough to accept it? The first real storm of the season arrived without warning, rolling over the desert like a living thing, and Ethan watched it from his porch with a strange sense of recognition, because that was exactly how the changes in his life now felt, sudden, unstoppable, and impossible to ignore. After the night Ayanna spoke about wanting at least 5 children, nothing between them returned to what it had been, not the silences, not the glances, not even the land itself. They didn't rush into declarations or promises, instead, they moved with a careful honesty that made everything feel heavier and more meaningful. Ayanna continued coming to the ranch for the water restoration project, but now their conversations carried weight, circling around family, responsibility, and the wounds neither of them had fully named. She told him about growing up Apache, about elders who believed children were the heartbeat of a people, about women who carried the future in their arms and men who learned that strength meant showing up every day even when fear said to run. Ethan listened like a man starving for truth, realizing how small his world had been, how he had confused solitude with peace. One evening, after a long day repairing fencing together, he finally confessed the truth he had never said aloud, that he once wanted children too, that he had imagined teaching a son to ride, watching a daughter chase fireflies, but had buried those dreams when life didn't cooperate. Ayana didn't pity him, she simply nodded and said dreams don't die, they wait. That sentence hit him harder than any loss he'd known. Slowly, their bond deepened into something undeniable, not loud or dramatic, but steady and real, built on shared labor, shared meals, and shared vulnerability. When Ethan was invited to attend a gathering on Apache land, he hesitated, afraid of being an outsider, but Ayana took his hand and reminded him that respect opens doors fear never will. At the gathering, surrounded by laughter, stories, and children running freely beneath the stars, Ethan felt something break open inside him. This was the life he had been avoiding because he believed he didn't deserve it. Elders spoke to him not as a stranger but as a man willing to learn, and for the first time, he felt seen not for what he lacked, but for what he could become. Months passed, seasons shifted, and with each sunrise Ethan found himself choosing connection over isolation. When Ayana finally told him she loved him, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, certain, and terrifyingly hopeful. He told her he loved her too, admitting his fear of failing, of being too late, of not being enough, and she answered with the kind of truth that changes lives, that love isn't about perfection, it's about commitment. When she spoke again of children, of laughter filling the ranch house, of traditions blending, of raising lives rooted in both heritage and heart, Ethan no longer laughed in disbelief. Instead, he imagined it clearly, vividly, and with gratitude. The lonely cowboy began fixing rooms he never thought he'd need, planting trees he might never sit under alone, and learning that legacy wasn't about land or cattle, but about the people who would one day call him father. The storm that night finally broke, rain soaking the dry earth, and Ethan stood beside Ayana as water breathed life back into the ground, understanding that some storms don't destroy, they prepare the soil for growth. And as the rain fell, washing away years of fear and resignation, Ethan realized his life had not been empty, it had been waiting. Waiting for courage. Waiting for love. Waiting for a woman brave enough to speak her dreams out loud and a man willing to grow into them. If this story moved you, if you believe that love can arrive when you least expect it and change everything, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. More powerful stories of transformation, hope, and second chances are coming, and the next one might speak directly to your heart.